Good morning, everyone. Gosh, what day is it? Tuesday? It suddenly feels like it's Friday. I'm excited to see you all here. We are talking about courage and consequently also talking about fear and the resiliency key of courage and why knowing how to navigate through fear is an essential skill to activating your full creative capacity. So, in the past couple of weeks, we've talked about conditioning and what conditions us, what causes us to sometimes integrate, assimilate, take in the idea that somehow it's not okay for us to be who we are and how we are. Anytime you start to buy into that lie, if you will, that it's not okay for you to be who you are and how you are, you live your conditioned story, your conditioned self. In order for you to stay in alignment with your well being, your abundance, your creativity, for you to have good and strong, enduring, healthy relationships, for you to be able to fulfill your life purpose and your soul purpose, for you to even have a really good, deep, sweet spiritual connection, you have to be aligned with your authentic self. If you're not, what happens is we, number one, burn a tremendous amount of energy trying to be someone we're not. And oftentimes, when we burn that extra energy trying to maintain a facade or a false identity, part of what happens for us is we get disconnected from our right place in the world and our right path, and we numb ourselves out. Or we literally, physically burn out, especially for those of you who have an undefined cycle, are manifestors, projectors, and reflectors. So, when we don't live our authentic identity, when we create these protective identities because we've bought into the lie that it's not okay for you to be who you are and how you are, we use extra energy that we don't have, and that's energy that doesn't get contributed to fulfilling your right path. The second thing that happens is we tend to then sabotage ourselves unconsciously. If you can't stand in your value, if you let fear run the show, if you struggle with decisiveness, if you can't interpret emotional energy correctly, if you're constantly in some way in a defensive mode, it makes it very hard for you to make good, long term, enduring choices. So, as we've been exploring conditioning and specifically in the last week and a half talking about the resiliency key of courage and fear, we've been looking at the spleen center. So we've talked about how the spleen center itself is under evolutionary pressure, that we're shifting from being purely instinctual beings to beings who have not only instinct, we all have instinct. You need that instinct to keep you safe from dangerous situations that you might sometimes get into. And we all have those. That's life, right? You know, it's good to be afraid of bears. It's good to be afraid of mountain lions. It's good to be afraid of eating weird mushrooms if you don't know what they are, right? That's a protective instinct, and you want to follow those fears. But because our consciousness is so complex, sometimes as human beings we experience fear about things that are really part of our true path, things that we need to do to elevate ourselves, or places where we have to push against ourselves, if you will, as part of our own soul growth and our own soul curriculum. We've also talked about how sometimes that fear is actually not fear. We talked about how sometimes that fear, we interpret it as fear, but it's really awe. And it's also that sort of thrilling excitement, also sometimes breath holding kind of experience that we have when we're on the threshold of expanding into elevating the narrative that we tell about who we are. We've been looking at the gates of the spleen and looking at, if you have these gates defined, how sometimes they can give us a prescription for specific types of fear. So we talked about how the gate 48 is sometimes experienced as the gate of inadequacy. We talked about how the gate 57 is sometimes experienced as a fear of moving forward into the future, or fear of the future. We talked about how the gate 44 is sometimes a fear of the past. And we talked about how the gate 50 is oftentimes the fear of failing others, the fear of letting other people down. And we talked a little bit about how the gate 50 can also sometimes be guilt, and why that guilt sometimes drives us to do things we are not really necessarily designed to do. Today we're going to talk about the gate 32, which in quantum human design I call the gate of endurance. It is one of the 3 gates that I call the FOMO gates. So when we're looking at the gates that connect the spleen center, that's the triangle on the left-hand side of the chart, with the root center, the square at the bottom of the chart, we're really talking about timing and the importance of timing. These 3 channels that connect the root to the spleen, because they don't have access to the throat, and they can't really get to the throat unless there's some kind of a throat connection happening there. These 3 channels are actually what we call projected channels in the chart, meaning they're energies that have to be recognized and or invited. And if we push with these energies and we don't wait for the recognition and the invitation, or another way of saying that, if we don't wait for right timing, what we end up doing is using massive amounts of energy and force and adrenaline energy and force to push against right timing and really not get the results that we hope for. And oftentimes what pushes us to push against right timing is our fear of missing out, particularly when we're looking at the gate 32. So we have to take a step back and talk about time and timing, because time and timing is really a big, interesting adventure. And I think human design does such an elegant job of really breaking down for us that the big aspect, or the most important part of strategy for all of the types, is not really about do this thing or be this way. It's really about explaining the unique way that each one of the types has to wait. And that waiting is really about aligning with right timing. We're all types, manifestors too, we're all in some way doing a cosmic tango with time and timing. And if we're pushing against right timing, what we're doing is we're pushing against our own energy. It takes time in the 3rd dimension to organize all the parts of the cosmic equation that moves your creation process out of Kairos, which is sort of timeless time and flow, or my 12-year-old projector calls it 5th dimensional time, into Chronos, which is clock time. There's a translation process that occurs when we're moving out of the flow of infinite time. That's where thoughts, ideas, inspirations, that's where our muse lives, right? And when we take that inspiration out of that flow time and put it into clock time, we have to follow the rules of the 3rd dimension, which means all the parts for the inspiration have to be ready. So let me break this down for you, because I think, if I give you a practical example, I'm hoping it'll really turn the light bulb on, and most importantly, really give you permission to move deeper into a trust of divine timing. Think about writing a book. Okay, and some of you maybe have that as a vision or a desire or something that you want to do. When you're in the process of writing a book, a lot of that process of writing the book is being in communication with your inspiration, or I like to call it your muse, right? You and your muse are plotting. You've got ideas, you're in the shower, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I should do this, and I could include this, and maybe you're taking down a couple of notes. You're in this creative flow with this project, this book. But here's the thing. You can't just sit down, write the book, publish a book, put it out into the world. First of all, it takes time to build a book, right? And when we look at, the experience of the 3D world, a lot of what takes time in the 3D world is the translation of inspiration into action, right? And the preparation, laying the foundation for the action and the timing of the action to be correct. So yes, in the Chronos, the timing part, the 3D timing part of the book writing process, there is, of course, the actual writing of the book. That's step 1. There's also finding somebody who's going to print the book, somebody to publish the book, somebody to edit the book, somebody to design the cover, somebody to know how to distribute the book, get it on Amazon, get it out into the bookstores, somebody who's going to buy the book, somebody who's going to deliver the book, somebody's going to read the book, somebody who's going to write a review about the book, somebody who's going to take all of those actions necessary to take that idea and literally turn it into a 3D experience. Okay? If we don't wait for the right timing, then all those people who are part of creating this book process Your publisher, your editor, the graphic designer, the mailman who delivers the book, the people who read the book, the people who put the book up on Amazon, the people who print the book, all those moving parts aren't in sync yet. There's no synchronicity, right? There's just you pushing because you've decided it's time. The gate 32 says, whoop, time out. You're not in charge of timing. You're supposed to be building the foundation first and then trusting that once that foundation is strong and deep, then the right timing will reveal itself. But what happens a lot of times with this gate 32 is we get so afraid that we're going to miss the opportunity. We get an idea and we're like, oh, I got to do that right now because if I don't, somebody else is going to do it, right? That's where the FOMO kicks in. Or we think, oh, if I don't do this, I'm going to miss the opportunity. Are you? Are you going to miss the opportunity if you show up for it and you're not ready? Probably not. So that gate 32 puts this pressure about time and timing on us that oftentimes causes us to pull the trigger before we're ready. Or, and here's the other piece, it also sometimes causes us to not lay the foundation so that the timing and the right timing never actually happens. So I coach business people, right? I coach people who are entrepreneurs, who are healers, who are service-based professionals. And one of the things we always get bungled up on is talking about websites and building a website and selling and marketing. And by the way, this 32 channel, if we look at the flow of it, it's part of business circuitry. The 54 from the root to the 32 to the 44 to the 26 to the will center, from the 21 to the 45 to the throat, that's the flow of business circuitry in the chart. If we don't lay the foundation first and we jump straight to, say, sales, which is where everybody wants to go, right? Everybody's like, oh, I have a product, I got to sell it. What am I going to do to sell it? I got to make money, right? And we don't think about, wait, time out. What is entailed in that sales process? First of all, if you're going to do sales, selling isn't about selling. That's the icky part we hate about selling. Selling is about building a relationship with a potential client and seeing if that client is really going to be part of a relationship that's going to benefit both of you, right? It's like dating. Selling is like dating. If you don't take your time to cultivate that relationship, and that might mean for some of you building a website, for example, if you don't take the time to build that, to have all those parts in place so that when the timing is right, you can just simply say, okay, go, and just push the button and be ready for the next step in the process. If we push against the right timing and we fail to have the foundation set, then usually it's never the right timing. And usually we're spinning around kind of stuck on a plateau, not making any progress because we think there's going to be something out here that's going to say, okay, now build your website. This is the something I want you to think about, and this is true for all types, including projectors. You're not going to get something to respond to. Timing's not going to be right if you're an initiator or a manifester. You're never going to get an invitation. You're never going to get recognition. And for the reflectors, the timing never will be right if you don't have the foundation built first. You know, I coach a lot of writers, and I coach projector writers, for example. And they're like waiting for the invitation to write the book. You don't need an invitation for the things that you can do on your own. You don't need an invitation to build a website. You don't need an invitation to write a book. You don't need an invitation for the things that you can do on your own. You need the invitation for the next right step, for getting that book out there, for selling your services or whatever it is that you're doing. But if you haven't laid the foundation piece first, then nothing's going to happen. So the 32, the fear of the 32 is a fear of failure. And so what happens oftentimes is that if you have that gate 32 defined, you will hold yourself back because you're afraid to even try, because you're afraid that if you try, you're going to fail. And so you fail to build the foundation. You fail to do the work that you can control, that you do have influence over, and you fail to be ready for the right timing because your fear of failing itself has kept you from doing the work necessary to lay the groundwork. So, again, because it's splenic, and we know that the only way through the existential fears of the spleen is to walk through them, the big scary challenge with this gate 32 is feel the fear and do it anyway. Write the book anyway. Build the website anyway. Get your headshots done anyway. Ask for a raise anyway for some of you. Or at least do the groundwork to be prepared for, to be ready to be recognized for the raise. Do the things you know you need to do. And if you're not doing this in business, let me give you an example. And some of you may have heard this example before because I use it a lot. It's one of my favorite stories. If it's not about business, it's still about doing the work to lay the foundation. So many, many, many years ago now, I used to teach a class called the Prosperity Bootcamp. And one of the things that we talked about as a way of influencing time and timing in Prosperity Bootcamp was to act as if. To literally use the power of exploration and experience and playing to embody the energy of whatever it is that you're intending. That embodiment of that intention, of that vision, that imagination that you have, that pretend play embodiment is actually part of laying the foundation energetically for the right timing. So I had a client, a student, who really, really, really wanted to move to Hawaii, but he didn't have the money. He didn't have any, he didn't have the means. And so what he started to do on Sunday mornings is he would go take himself out for a nice cup of coffee. He would, before he left the house, pack his suitcase as if he was going to Hawaii. He would have his coffee, go to the airport, stand in line at the ticket counter for the airline that he wanted to fly on. He would go through the line, pretend as if he was checking in for his flight. He never obviously ever checked in because he didn't have a ticket, but he stood there and really pretended as if he was going to Hawaii, right? So over time, this became so much a part of his energy field. He created this energetic prayer field by doing the prep work, right? By laying the foundation energetically. Then eventually one friend of his who lived in Hawaii called him up and said, hey, I'm going off the island for a couple of months. Would you come to Hawaii, stay in my house, no charge, house sit for me, and you can enjoy being here in Hawaii. He was like, okay, I'm on it. He didn't even have to think about what he was going to pack. He was ready, right? So he flew to Hawaii. He house sat for a couple of months, and while he was there, he made a lot of friends, a lot of connections, and he got a job. And that job was a good enough job, an abundant enough job, that he was actually able to stay on the island of Hawaii and ultimately moved there. So the prep work, that ability to really, put into play the energy that allowed him to hold that prayer field in place, the prep work, so that he could be in alignment with the right timing when the right timing happened, was perfect. So again, even if you're not in business, even though this gate is part of the business circuit, even if you're not in business, it's about making sure that you're setting the stage, doing the prep work, being ready so that when the timing is right, all you gotta do is pull the trigger. And you don't have to scramble then to catch up with stuff you didn't get done that's important and vital to the fulfillment or the manifestation of whatever it is you're trying to create. That channel, the 5432, is also the place where dreams can become manifest reality. But to do that, you got to be ready. You got to do the groundwork. You have to lay the foundation. That's an important part of how you can actually influence right timing and not miss out on anything. So that's the gate 32. Tomorrow I'll be back here. We'll be talking about the gate 28, the second of the FOMO gates, the fear of missing out gates. And an important gate, again, that we need to explore if we're going to look at how do we influence time and divine timing so that we can be in the flow of time and timing and not feel stuck, jammed, or blocked for whatever reason. Do be sure, if you haven't already, scroll down. There's a couple of posts that list it, and I'll come post the link when I'm done broadcasting. For my free program next week, I'm teaching it 2 different times, Wednesday night and Thursday afternoon. You don't have to come to both sessions. It's just pick one. I'm just doing it in different time zones because we have clients from all over the world. The program that I'm going to be teaching is a 60-minute deconditioning by design class. So if you are struggling with money, if you're struggling with your relationships, if you're trying to figure out how to make changes that really stick, if you're procrastinating, if you feel like you've got a self-sabotage protocol, if you're not really activating your relationships the way you want to, if you feel like there's anything in your narrative that's keeping you from really stepping into the full expression of your authentic self, come next week. We're going to talk about why you might be experiencing that feeling stuck, blocked, or even that pain, And we're going to look at how to get underneath all that, how to get to the root of what's holding you back so that you can really tap into your innate creative power, your abundance, your right relationships, your aligned path, your right sense of timing, and really tap into the full expression of who you are. So it's totally free. I'm just doing this because I want to share this information with you. Again, scroll down below. I'll put the link below. Wednesday next evening or Thursday during the day, you decide, but do join us. It's going to be a really powerful program, and I'm going to share with you some information that I haven't shared, or I have shared one other time. So really brand new information for you to learn about how you can tap into your authentic self. So I'll see you guys tomorrow.